Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first Insider Spotlight. This is Michaela from Ascend Smarter Intervention, where we make research-based reading intervention easy. And I'm here today with one of the most amazing SLPs and literacy instructors, Becky. So welcome. We're so excited to get to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Perfect. So my name is Becky McArthur. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I live in Waterloo, Ontario, in Canada. I pre-COVID serviced clients in my childhood hometown area of Norfolk County, and I'm now providing telepractice services and starting to provide telepractice services for kids across Ontario, which has been kind of interesting and exciting. So I'm the owner of We Communicate, which is a private speech language pathology practice.
Awesome. Well, that's all so exciting. And yes, you did bring up a good point about pre-COVID and now that we're all kind of in the heart of it, how intervention might look a little bit different. Can you speak a little bit more to how you've adapted?
Absolutely. So I actually just started my practice in March of 2019. So I was about 3 days post my 1-year anniversary and all of this happened.
Oh my gosh.
So I was pretty lucky though. Like I had a set of clients who were amazing and really adaptable and excited to kind of pivot with me. So I moved all of I typically provide in-person services in clients' homes. I actually drive to their homes. And so I moved about half my caseload right from the beginning to telepractice. So I use the Zoom platform. And honestly, my literacy kids have been the easiest kids to transition. I see sort of kids of all ages, even as little as like 1.5. And so, that younger population has been, a little bit more challenging, not hard, but just having to work a little bit more for it. But my literacy kids have been doing amazing. And I mean, the Smarter Intervention program, you guys created all your digital materials. So it's literally the simplest thing. And so I am now providing services through telepractice and have been even taking on new clients, which has been amazing. It's sort of interesting as much as, there are definitely difficult things that come with this time. I also have some families with this like beautiful opportunity where kind of the world is on pause and they have a few months to like make really big gains in their reading and writing. So that's been really exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad that even in the midst of all the craziness and the chaos that's currently unfolding, it sounds like your practice is doing really well and you're able to reach so many students. I can't believe you're seeing 1.5-year-olds online.
So luckily at that age, you're doing a lot of parent coaching and parent training. And so my parents are honestly amazing. They're the ones, I feel lucky I get to sit on this side of the camera and just tell them information and things to try. And they are on the other side having to kind of handle a laptop or a phone and a toddler. So they're amazing, but it's a great age group for telepractice because I can so easily coach through video. So it's great.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about how you're pulling literacy into your practice, knowing that you do have a speech language pathology background and that's what your practice is. Tell us how you're pulling literacy in.
Absolutely. So literacy, I mean, I would say maybe not most people, but literacy is within the scope of speech language pathology. That being said, I remember in grad school, like some kids who have language difficulties also have reading and writing difficulties. Done. Like I was not given a lot of education and information on it. And I would say many speech pathologists feel that way. As soon as they think like reading and writing, it's just, it's that beast. It's so big and we don't have a ton of training on how to tackle it really well. But two major components of literacy, speech sounds and, the sound system, and then language are things we have extensive knowledge in. So I'm constantly telling speech pathologists, like especially in private practice, there's so many kids out there struggling with reading and writing and they're not getting what they need in the public setting. And, we have a ton of the base information. And if you can get onto a program like Smarter Intervention to figure out what that extra pieces that we don't have as much training in, there's so many strong ways that we can support kids. So I started noticing it. I was really lucky. My previous job, I had a boss and mentor who was very into literacy. So that's where I first got exposed to it. But even before then, I saw a lot of kids, especially preschool kids with many speech sound errors. They're at higher risk for reading and writing difficulties. And I would see these kids, and I mean, we often see kids for long periods of time, and then often keep in touch with families. And they would just be those kids who, like, you know, you made big improvements in their speech sounds and they go off to grade 1. And then all of a sudden you kind of heard from the parents, like, they're kind of struggling still in school. Mm-hmm. And I just really started noticing, like, man, I am missing something here. I don't have it all. And so I was really lucky to get introduced by my last boss. And then when I started my private practice is when I found Smarter Intervention through the SLP Summit, which was amazing. It was kind of one of those things, like, I believe a lot in, like, things happen for a reason. That was January of 2019. And in March 2019, I started my practice. So it's one of those areas that I'm constantly saying to speech pathologists, like, we have, especially in Ontario, in Canada, we don't really have reading specialists as much as there is in the United States. So there's a huge gap in our curriculum and our instruction for kids. So yeah, we're kind of lucky we have some base knowledge. And then honestly, as speech pathologist, if you have speech sound training and language training and Smarter Intervention, you're set. Like, I tell my friends that all the time, and colleagues, I'm like, you're set.
Well, I love that you bring up the fact that this totally is the space for an SLP, because that's something that we over here at Smarter Intervention are so passionate about, and was a big reason why we were so excited to be a part of that SLP Summit. So shout out to all of those ladies who ran that, because that is an absolutely amazing conference, and we were so excited to be a part of that. But I love that you recognize that, yes, there's something that's not totally landing for some of these students. What can I do to really tie it all together? And found that literacy was kind of that piece to just pull all of that together for these students. Mm-hmm. So kind of piggybacking off of that question, if you were talking with another SLP or somebody who was interested in being an SLP and interested in literacy, but they didn't totally know how that all fit together, what advice would you give them, or what would you tell them?
Oh, such a good question. And that's actually something that I also educate parents on a lot. You know, especially now having my own private practice, I am so lucky that I can kind of educate parents the way that I feel is the best, and other colleagues. And so many of those kids who are younger, educators and speech pathologists and parents need to know that sort of they're down the road, that there might be more. Honestly, though, there is nothing better from an educator point of view than a program that will guide you. Mm-hmm. I remember doing literacy instruction, like, right when I got out of grad school. And unfortunately, like, it was not that strong, and I felt so overwhelmed. And having seen a program like Smarter Intervention now, I'm like, no wonder I felt so overwhelmed. Like, it's such a beast. It's so big. And so, you know, making sure that you are supported, whether that's through, you know, your own research and all of those things, or a program like Smarter, to be able to understand all of those components and that scope and sequence is really what you need. I mean, that foundational skill, like, I find a lot of speech paths have, you know, awareness of phonological awareness and doing those tasks and phonics, but that's really, like, just scraping the surface. Like, there's so much after that. So honestly, finding a community of people in a program that will support you is so, so key. And then just continuing to learn. Like, there's so much information out there. And unfortunately, like, the science of reading, like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, like, it's been around for a while. I don't know why it's like this big secret, like, people don't know it.
Yes, we just want to get all of that, the science and the data and what research actually supports, because we're finding that there's so many misconceptions about what literacy is or should be and all of the different pieces. So yes, like you said, I don't know why it's been this big secret, but we're happy to share it and bring people to know it.
I love it.
Absolutely. So what has been your biggest aha moment in literacy?
So kind of piggybacking on my last answer, and I just had to make sure I had the right note down, I would say scope and sequence. Mm-hmm. That understanding that and starting to provide intervention. And I remember, I mean, when I started the Smarter Intervention, just even the training, I hadn't even seen a client. I was moving through the training modules online through the program. And I was just like, whoa, even from that, I was just like, wow, it's so big and it's so vast. And that's why it sometimes feels so overwhelming, like you're never going to make progress. And then beginning to move through it with students and understanding that like, you have to teach this first, because 5 weeks from now or 5 months from now, I'm going to teach you this. And it's all kind of adding together. I think that for me was just like, it made so much sense to me. And then I started seeing in my students like, oh, hey, you told me about that. And I was just like, yes, that's exactly what I meant. And like what you guys have built, like, it's incredible. And so, you know, again, like that base information, you know, oftentimes in schools, they're doing some phonological awareness and some phonics, and that is amazing. But these kids who really have brain differences and who really struggle, you know, why do you put CK at the end of a word? Like, you know, I used to have kids I would remember and they would just be like, you know, sock, S-O-K. And I'd be like, well, that's a CK. And I didn't know why. And, you know, you're trying to give intervention, but then you start to see how that all builds. So for me, it was scope and sequence and being able to instruct it well, and also educate parents on like, you know, okay, that will come. Right now we're working on building this, and that will all come too.
Absolutely. I have so many things that I agree with there. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I love that you said was that CK comes at the end of the word. And when you were instructing that, you said, I knew that, but I didn't know why. And I remember vividly with my first student, we had done the CK lesson, we had gone through a couple of closed syllables, and I was reading through my instructor manual for DGE, and I was like, no English word ends in J. That's why we use DGE after a short vowel and GE after a what? And it was so eye-opening. And I was like, why did I not learn this in school? And no fault to my teachers or how my education system went, but it would have been so much easier had we known those rules. So I think educating ourselves, but also parents on some of those rules is crucial.
So then, huge.
Like you said, bucketing them into an order that's going to make sense. So teaching the vowels short and long, we can know that A makes A, but then giving it some time before we introduce AI and AY, and then even more time before we introduce EIGH.
Yes.
Students that will bring spelling lists to me at school, and they're learning long A as an open vowel, as a magic E or a VCE vowel, AI, AY, EIGH, EA, all of these different components in one lesson. And I'm like, I can't even make sense of this list, let alone instruct you on how to know all of these concepts without having those syllable type buckets.
Yeah.
Or some sort of clue or rule for them to hold on to. So I love that you said that. In terms of, and this is genuinely me being interested in asking, in terms of the scope and sequence for literacy, how do you pair that in terms of the speech language pathology and the skills that you're teaching there? Is there an easy way to overlap that? How do you go about that?
Really good question. So I have found, I mean, children, especially with severe speech sound disorders, I mean, I'd always love to get them earlier. Sometimes I end up with a kid on my caseload who's like severe speech sound disorder and literacy and language. I'm like, whoa. So ideally I get kids younger, and many children do refer to private speech language pathologists in Ontario, at least, for speech sound errors. They just, they notice it. I think a lot of parents still align their teacher with the one to guide them on reading solely, like not seeking other help, other than like tutoring is very common in Ontario. So many of my kids I do get earlier for speech sound disorders, and my approach is I typically try to make big progress fast in that area, and then we move on to some literacy. I will sometimes, Kelly Farquharson actually is a really awesome researcher. Do you know her? Yeah, through social media also. So she's amazing. And so I often use a lot of her tips about pairing speech sound disorders with the orthography piece. So I'm now always like, I write the letter S when I'm doing the sound, that type of thing. And sometimes I'll add in some phonological awareness as well for those kids early on. But I tried to get that speech sound disorder kind of figured out and kind of make that part of the past. And then I start with like major literacy intervention. So I try to kind of again, I typically get those kids earlier. Many of those kids are 4 or 5 or 6 when I get them on my caseload. And then that's where the parent education starts, is your kid's going to be at higher risk. We can start doing some of these things to provide maybe a little bit of, support in the interim to reduce the impact. But it's going to be very likely that I'm going to recommend literacy intervention following speech sound disorder intervention. And then my kids who are language, like honestly, Smarter Intervention does it all for you. Like, it's incredible. And sometimes I'm really, again, as a speech pathologist, I have some kids who really struggle with language. And so then I'm able to sort of pull what you guys have started and we just kind of run with it times 5, if they need that much support. So, but honestly, it's so well tucked in there that I'm able to do both. But again, it's just so much of that parent education is so key, as understanding why. I do so much explaining to parents about, like, they also have this language piece. Yeah, we have to learn how to read words, but there's also this whole language component that we have to support.
Absolutely. I love that you are starting that parent education so early, because I've seen in evaluations that I've received for my students, I've seen them in the IEPs and 504s from the school, where I'll have a student come to me and I'm looking through their paperwork and it says, had speech services as a 3 or 4-year-old, discontinued in kindergarten or 1st grade. And then they're coming to me in 3rd or 4th saying, there's still holes and there's still gaps, we need reading intervention. And so I love that, since you do often find these students earlier and they're younger, that you're able to start that much sooner with the family, knowing that early intervention is so crucial.
Yeah. And I definitely have families who, that acceptance and that process takes some time. I actually knew a family and kind of chatted with mom over many months. And they finally got a psychoed and ended up with a diagnosis. And it took months. And he's a little bit older, but now we're like into literacy intervention. And, whether it was me or some other provider, like knowing that he'll be well supported, I chat with that mom often and like get emotional with her, because it just makes me so happy to know that he's now supported. Because another huge part of that is like childhood, mental wellness and well-being. And these kids have been told for years that they're lazy or they're not working hard enough, or I've already told you that. And so, getting that early and giving them the right type of support so that they can be successful is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, it breaks my heart when I have a student come in and they're like, my teacher, like at school, or this kid in my class, or this person on the playground, whatever it is, and they just feel so bad, as a simple word there, because it is a struggle. But we know that if we approach literacy in a different way, that it's gonna connect for them, and it might take a little bit longer, but we can make it happen. And yeah, like you said, you get emotional. I've got a couple of kids in mind where I've seen that progression, where they come in and they don't want to be there and they're like, this is dumb, kind of that defense mechanism.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden they get into the 2nd or 3rd syllable type and they're like, I get it.
Yeah, this makes sense.
And they just get so excited for the remaining lessons because it finally clicks and they can see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we say all the time, like, early intervention is key. I was working with a grade 1 via telepractice the other day. Grade 1, like, she's so young. And we were decoding short vowel words together, and she couldn't get one. And she looked up at the camera and was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, honey, you don't need to be sorry. Like, if you need help, you ask me. Like, that young already, starting to internalize some of that, like, it's my fault, I can't do it, like, so young. And she's the epitome. She came to me as a severe speech sound disorder, one of my first weeks of my private practice. And, she's like remediated super well. And we're diving into literacy now because she's really high risk. So, but yeah, getting those parents and those families early is awesome.
The I'm sorry's kill me when they're like, I'm sorry, I spelled it wrong, or I'm sorry, I forgot the directions, or I'm sorry. And I'm like, you don't have to be sorry. You can always ask, like, let's do our best, as long as you're doing your best. If you spell it wrong, that's what the eraser is for. Like, we're totally good here. And it's that mindset coaching also, where some of these students have just ingrained in their brains. So for so long that it's bad or wrong, or they need to be sorry and they don't. And yeah, I'm getting emotional talking about it.
I know. I know.
Tugs on your heart a little bit there.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I want to be conscious of your time as well. So is there anything that you want to ask us, or is there anything else that you would leave or say to somebody watching this video?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'll ask my question first, and then why don't I end with a thought? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
One of my questions was actually, I've had a few clients, again, typically they're those speech sound disorder kids who have moved into literacy. I'm very much querying something like dyslexia for them. Although many of my clients, getting a psycho ed through school is very difficult in Ontario. Extremely difficult, especially where I service. So they don't have any formal diagnosis, and we're starting with phonological awareness and the foundations curriculum. That's typically where I start. And there are certain phonological awareness tasks that it's like they can't master it. So I had a client specifically with rhyming, and then another client with segmenting syllables. And like, we're talking months of weekly intervention. And I was just wondering, I kind of took the approach of, I was like, okay, we're going to definitely put our due diligence in. Like, we're not going to try it 1 week and let it go. But like, I think we were in our 7th week of segmenting syllables and still struggling, along with all those other, skills that we're working on. And so at that point, I kind of took a pivot and we started working on other phonological awareness skills. And then we ended up coming back and it had improved. And I was just wondering what your recommendation is, as far as, do you just keep going? Or is there sort of a period of time where maybe you expose and model and, support, and if it's still not going anywhere, switch?
Yeah. So can I ask what lesson the syllable segmenting that student is in the curriculum?
Okay, so I did like a screener of all of her letter sound correspondences, and she only needed a few of them. I can't remember now. This is a while ago. So I think she needed like Y, Q, like QU. Every kid needs that one. Vowels, we reviewed all vowels. So we weren't necessarily, I kind of took the approach, again, it's sometimes a little bit, I try to go by the curriculum, but also as a speech path, I'm like, okay, these are her phonological awareness skills she needs support in, and these are the letter sounds. So it wasn't like tied 1-to-1. So maybe that's why. Should I have followed it more strict?
We do have the phonological awareness skills in that foundations level built in a progression, so that could be part of it. But pulling them to match your speech language pathology scope and sequence, or the skills you're working on there, can definitely help as well. With the syllable segmenting, something that I've noticed with some of my students is, as they're going through, I have to really ingrain for them what a syllable is, because so often they're just like, and I'm like, okay, that can help us hear them, or clapping out the syllables, but they don't understand that it's a vowel sound in a word. So yeah, a syllable is a word or a part of a word with one vowel sound. So often I'll see, once we get into some of the closed syllables and then multi-syllable words, as they can see that, let's say the word is kickstand. They know kick is one syllable. We've talked about it for weeks. We add in the second syllable and they can see those other vowels. That might start to help in terms of just that, almost the orthographic skill that we talked about earlier, bringing back that visual pattern, but then also tying it into the phonological awareness again. So saying, okay, kickstand, how many vowels do you hear? I and then a. So that's going to be 2 vowels. And then pulling it back into some of the other syllable type patterns like magic E. Okay, bike, we see 2 vowels. How many do you hear? We only hear 1, it's only 1 syllable. So in terms of just the literacy side, that's something that I've seen work with some of my students. But I think in terms of pulling in extra pieces for homework and really differentiating the sounds and syllables, I don't know if that's one of the errors that they've been making, but that's something I see with my students. I'll say, how many syllables is kick? And they're going k, ik. I'm like, oh, that's 3 sounds. How many syllables? And just really reinforcing that.
Yeah.
That would be my advice there. I hope that answered that question or helps guide that a little bit. But Yeah, if you have other thoughts or ideas or things that you try, I'd love to talk more because I do see some of those segmenting.
Yes.
The skills are a challenge for students.
Yeah, for sure. And differentiating between them. I think I saw, I don't know if it was you or Corey, but with older students, you were doing like sound, syllable, word, phrase, sentence. I loved that. And I use that all the time. The other thing that I do use with my students a couple times, I have two boys that I'm working with the same age, like not together, but they, you know, many of the phonological awareness, I did the whole baseline assessment on both of them. And so often I'd be like, bike, what's the middle sound? Or sorry, kick, what's the middle sound? I'm like, no, that's the letter.
The letter, yep.
So I started doing with my clients, sounds are what you hear. So when we're talking about sounds, I'll draw an ear. And when we're talking about letters, I draw I draw eyes. And there's just something about that visual that has worked for them. So
that is amazing. I am going to pull that in, and just even what you did with your hand here, being in telepractice or even face-to-face with a student, saying, okay, what's the middle sound?
Yes.
Kick. Okay, now what letter makes that sound?
Yeah.
That is such a great cue. I love that.
I love it. And honestly, that's what I was going to say as my last note is that, you know, I think there are so many educators, you know, I can speak about Ontario and Canada, but I mean, I'm sure across the world who can provide this intervention so well. So many speech pathologists that I talk to feel like literacy is not part of their wheelhouse. And that is a perfect example. As speech paths, we're constantly like cueing. We use gestural cues and placement cues. Cueing and supporting in a hierarchy is literally what we're trained to do for communication. And so I would just honestly empower speech pathologists, especially who are listening to this, that if you feel like this is something you might want to do, you know, you can find a program that will set you up with the information, and then you can kind of connect all of this training you've already had with this program. And it's incredible how you can support these kids. So that's honestly what I would leave with, just because that's my view as a speech path. And there's just so many speech pathologists out there that I know that they've thought about it, and they just have to take the leap, because with this program and what they already know, they would support the kids that they already know even more. So,
well, thank you so much for that. You are just this wonderful like source for information. So thank you so much. Where, I know that you have your private practice and you've been running webinars and things as well. So where can folks watching this find you?
I'm probably the most active on Instagram and Facebook. So on Instagram, I'm we_communicate. And on Facebook, you can find me at We Communicate SLP. That's for speech language pathologist. So I'm available there. I also have my website, wecommunicateslp.com, and I try to keep it as updated as possible. And honestly, people can just reach out to me. You can shoot me DMs wherever. You can send me an email. I love connecting with other educators. I was actually just chatting with an EA, an educational assistant, the other week. I don't even know her, but she found my webinars and watched one, and we chatted about a student of hers to kind of better support him. So if you want to get in touch, especially if you're in Ontario, feel free to reach out. I love connecting with others.
Awesome. I was going to say that's kind of how we connected too. So that's a perfect example there. So thank you so much. Again, we are Smarter Intervention. We are so excited to be able to have conversations with our members like Becky. They are changing the world, especially for these students. So thank you so much. Comment below if you have any questions about literacy, especially if you're an SLP and wondering how it connects to you and your field. And we'll see you next time.